Here are the materials that you will use for your knit beanie. Start by measuring the circumference of your head from the base over your ears into your forehead. Note that measurement and multiply it by 1.5 to figure out how many stitches that you will need to cast on with. Taking your original measurement, for example, my head circumference was 22 inches, you're going to measure out a tail of yarn, that number times 3. So that means that I will need 66 inches to start my cast on. Once you have that ready, you're going to begin your slip knot. To begin your cast on, you will need to start by putting the long tail of the yarn away from your body and the ball of the yarn close to your body. Wrap the yarn around your 2 fingers 1.5 times, coming up through the center on that half point. Pull your slip knot and then put the stitch onto your knitting needle. You will pull it so that it's tight, but make sure that it's loose enough so that you can knit later. To begin your cast on, you'll have your tail away from you and your working yarn towards you, and then you're going to put your pointer finger in between the 2, and then you're going to grab the other 2 yarns with your 3 fingers and spread open with your thumb. Go over and behind your thumb with your thumb up in the air, put your thumb down, and then wrap the yarn with the needle around the other side to pull through. Again, make your knitting gun, pull behind, grab the other finger, pull a loop, and tighten. Do this for the amount of times that was your head circumference times 1.5. I'm going to do mine for 33 stitches. After you've completed your cast on, make sure to count that the number of stitches that you've cast on is correct. I should have 33 here. Once you do that, we're going to use the end of the yarn that has the tail, and you're going to tuck that tail over so that you don't start knitting with it, and you're going to use the other side of your knitting needle to begin doing your hat. To start with the knit stitch, you will have the working yarn, as in the yarn that's attached to the ball, in your right hand. There are many different ways to do this, but this is the way that I will be teaching for this class. You'll go under that first stitch, wrap the yarn around it, pull through, and then you're going to take the stitch off. So again, with your right needle, you're going to go behind and under the next stitch, wrap the yarn around, pull through, and then take the stitch off. If you've cast on tight like I have, which is really common for new knitters, this first row might be a little bit of a challenge. But once you start getting used to it, your knitting will start to loosen and the knitting will start to become a little bit more easy. You're going to continue this stitch for the rest of the project. Now you'll notice that there was that little section, that part where the tail is, that's a little bit loose. Don't worry about that. Once your hat is complete, you will be able to adjust that so that the gap is filled in. And if you keep it so that gap is there, then you'll be able to adjust the size of your hat in case it's too tight or if you want to loosen it just a little bit. After you've gone around in a circle like this for a couple of hours, you should have about 10 inches. 10 inches is going to be good if you want a pom-pom at the top and a little bit of a slouch. If you would like it to be closer, then you can go about 8 inches, or you can use the entire ball of yarn except for the last 8 inches if you want it to be really slouchy without a pom-pom. Now we're going to begin decreasing. That means that you're going to take 2 stitches instead of 1 and do the knit stitch, and you'll remove those 2 stitches at once. After you've done this as much as you possibly can, which is usually around 9 stitches with this length of circular knitting needles, you'll have about 8, and then you'll be able to complete your hat. Once you've completed your final decrease, you're going to need to cut your yarn and grab your darning needle. Measure out about 8 inches or so that you have a little bit of tail to work with as you're tying off the top of your hat. And then using chapstick or wax, you're going to wax the end of your yarn and give it a nice good cut. And then you're going to put it through the darning needle. Keep in mind, I had to try this about 3 times before I was successful with it. Once you have your darning needle on, you're going to start to go through all of those remaining loops, and then you're going to cinch in those remaining loops so that it ties into a closed circle. You can do this one at a time like this, or you can push all of the loops over to the end of the needle, and you're going to start to go through them, and then you can remove all of the loops once you've gone through the darning needle. Make sure that you don't skip any of these, otherwise you can start to unravel your hat. Once you've gone all the way around, you can now remove your knitting needles entirely and set them aside. Cinch the top of the hat so that the hole is closed. And now we're going to tie off the tail of the yarn so that your hat doesn't come undone. Start by putting the darning needle through one of the loops, and then you're going to tie a knot so that that loop stays in place. After you've done that, we want to make sure to hide our tail. And you're welcome to do this a couple of times until you feel that your knot is secure. Now, if you turn the hat inside out, you'll be able to see the purl side of the hat, and you can start to weave around the inside. Some people will do this in a star shape. Some people will be really methodical about this. For your first hat, do what you need to do to finish it. Once you feel good about the finish of your hat, you can snip the end of it. Now we're going to hide the tail that we began with when you started knitting the hat. So you're going to pull your yarn through the darning needle. Be sure to use wax or chapstick if you need to. And then make sure that you try on your hat before you do this so that it can stretch out the way that it needs to stretch out if it's too small. Or if you need to tighten it, you can tighten it just a little bit. I'm going to go up diagonally through some of my purl stitches, and then I like to tie off the knot. After you tie the knot, you can be finished with your hat, or you can go on to sew a pom-pom at the end of it, which you will need additional yarn for. After you've done this, you can clip your thread, and you've now finished your slouchy beanie.